Hi everyone, and welcome back to the channel. So I've talked to a number of people who have told me that I would like to get a reptile, but I don't know where to get a reptile. And I definitely don't recommend buying a reptile at one of the big box pet stores. And if you live somewhere where you're lucky enough to have a really good reptile store, then that's great. But for most people like me, we don't have that. So that really only leaves the option of buying reptiles online and having them shipped. And buying reptiles online might seem like a scary thing to do, and you might even wonder, is that even safe for the reptiles? But experienced breeders do this every day, and they know how to package animals in ways that minimizes the stress and keep them completely safe in that shipping process. So in today's video, I'm going to give you some tips on buying reptiles online. So the first and probably most important tip I can give you before you buy a reptile, make sure that you're prepared to bring that reptile home. And that means doing all the research that you need to do to know all the care requirements for that particular reptile, and having the enclosure and environment set up for it ahead of time, having a supply of food ready for it. Because the last thing you want to do is make an impulse purchase of a reptile and get it home and not be prepared to take care of it. The second tip is to make sure that you're working with an experienced and knowledgeable breeder. I've bought lots of frogs from Josh's Frogs. And Josh's Frogs is just excellent. They have such a good reputation, and their customer service has always been great, and I've always received completely healthy animals that have been very well packaged. And aside from that, I usually use morphmarket.com. And if you've never seen morphmarket.com, it's basically an online marketplace where any breeder can put listings for reptiles that they have for sale. And what I like about morphmarket.com is that any breeder that sells on MorphMarket has ratings, and people can leave reviews. So whoever you're looking at buying a reptile from, you can look at their ratings, you can see reviews from other customers who have bought reptiles from them and what kind of experience they had, and you can really get a good feel for, is that an experienced and knowledgeable breeder. And morphmarket.com also has a really user-friendly system for communicating and leaving messages and receiving messages from those breeders. So you can get any questions you have answered right there on their website. So for tip number 3, say you're on morphmarket.com and you see so many snakes, and snakes listed that are less expensive and some that are very expensive, and you might see all kinds of different morphs. And at some point, that can just become a little bit overwhelming. And one piece of advice I would give you is don't get too wrapped up in what kind of morph you should choose. My advice would be, if you want to spend $10,000 on the ball python that is pink with purple polka dots and orange stripes, then that's fine. But a more wild type snake is going to be just as beautiful, probably more affordable, and probably more healthy. So for tip number 4, once you've narrowed down what kind of snake you want and you start picking out a breeder that you feel comfortable with, and maybe you've narrowed it down to a few snakes, don't be afraid to ask questions about that particular animal. and read everything that the breeder has listed in his advertisement for that animal. You want to make sure that it specifies that it is a captive bred animal and not a wild caught. And if an ad does not specify that it is a captive bred animal, I would make sure that I verify that with the breeder. If the breeder has only one picture of that snake and it's maybe a poor quality picture, don't be afraid to ask for multiple pictures from them. And don't be afraid to ask questions like, how has this reptile been eating? Or what has his temperament been like? After all, you're giving money to a breeder for an animal that you do not get to see in person before you buy it. And I base a lot of my buying decision on how well or not a breeder might communicate with me and answer my questions. Tip number 5 is to look for a breeder that is fairly close to you and not all the way on the other side of the country. Because as this reptile is going to be shipped overnight to you, it's going to take a ride on an airplane. And I want my reptile to spend as least amount of time as possible on that airplane. And when you purchase your reptile, what you want to do is look up the address for the FedEx hub nearest you and give the breeder the instructions to send your reptile to that FedEx hub for you to pick up the next morning. And this might mean that you have to do a little bit more planning, a little bit more effort in your schedule to pick that reptile up in the morning at that FedEx hub. But that also means that your reptile is going to spend much less time traveling around in a FedEx truck. And I trust myself a lot to go pick up a reptile and get it back to my house more than I do a FedEx truck driver. Anything that you can do to minimize the amount of travel time for your reptile is going to minimize the amount of stress on it. And it might take a little bit more planning on your part, but I think that's worth it to make the whole experience less stressful for your reptile. So my final tip for buying snakes and other reptiles online is to take the snake out of the box that it comes in right when you get home right away, because some breeders' guarantees become void after a certain amount of time passes after you've picked it up. And most likely there will be no problems, but you want to check the animal out and make sure that it is fine and completely healthy. And if there is a problem, you want to let the breeder know right away. And once you've determined that your reptile is healthy and okay, then just put it in its enclosure and give it some time to chill. Avoid wanting to handle it too much when you first get it, because it's already had quite a big experience traveling to you. It's been uprooted from the enclosure that it's already known and put in a new enclosure. So it's going to need some time to chill and acclimate to its new surroundings. I would give it about a week or so before you start doing any handling with it. Just make sure that it has water and anything else that it needs. So especially if this is your first time buying a snake online, I hope you found this video helpful. And if you did, then do me a favor and give it a like, or please consider subscribing to the channel. And until the next video, I look forward to seeing you again real soon.